Welcome to Dead Genre Chronicles, a critical podcast on the diversity of JRPGs. Drawing from the origin of the genre to the present day, every month we play through a JRPG and we invite you to play along and send us your questions and thoughts on it. I'm Devon, and I'm plotting the downfall of this podcast by picking games that my co-hosts don't like.
I'm Becky. Actually, I'm a golden daughter.
I'm Leroy, and I relate to the character arc of becoming a silent protagonist.
Oh, okay, so Golden Sun is a kind of traditional and very simply plotted in terms of like actual motivations and things going on. There's a lot of filler in the Lost Age just because they wanted to like kind of have you meet back up with your old party, which is one of the weird things. This is originally, it was meant to be one game, but they had to split it into two for some reason. I don't know the development cycle, but they ended up splitting it into two, and thus it has kind of that Suikoden thing where you could transfer your old saves to the second half and import more relevant things than Suikoden ever did. I like this game, that's why I put it on the list. Ending is whatever. My co-hosts both hate the ending.
We'll get to the ending.
But yeah, it's a very simple game in terms of, like, you're trying to adventure to save the world. That's mainly it.
Yeah, I've got to say, like, I thought the opening of Golden Sun was incredibly strong. Like, the kind of prologue bit with the earthquake and the rock falling down the mountain, that whole sequence I thought was maybe the strongest kind of emotional punch I've ever had with a 2D RPG. Partly aided by the fact that the crisis is there's a boulder rolling down the mountain and it's going to crush the village. And at the end of the sequence, it does roll down the mountain and crush the village. And it lands on some people who are very dear to the protagonist. Then this thing happens where you regain control of the character, but there's actually no sign that you do. Like, nothing changes. It's just the cutscene ends. And because the cutscenes are all in-engine, for want of a better phrase, it's the same screen. There's no change. And so I was actually sat there for about 10 seconds waiting for the next thing to happen or for a sign that control had regained, which for the aftermath of a tragedy really worked for me. And there is there's a palpable shock in that moment. I felt that it actually happened. So I started out on the right foot and slowly just the game bled away for me over the course of like the 50-ish hours that it takes to play both of them.
I also love the intro sequence, and even after that, there's good characterization of Isaac and Garrett. That kind of just never happens again for the rest of the entire game.
I mean, Garrett's a pain in the ass, but in fairly convincing ways, in ways that are actually the manifestation of a character flaw, rather than it just being, oh, he's a video game sidekick, and they're always pains in the ass.
He's also, like, the most skeptical character. Like, when you go beat the shit out of Dodonpa and his giant frog, he's just like, what the fuck? You're just gonna forgive him for that? Are you stupid? What? We need to put this guy in jail here where he kept Hammett, you dumbass. It's just like, oh, right. This is like the voice of skepticism, but they didn't really need that for the second party because Kraden was there being the voice of lore.
Kraden's there speaking for everyone. I'm Kraden, and I speak for the party.
God, I hate Kraden so much.
The problem is he's like significantly older, so they probably would have just shut up, and that's part of like Japanese respect your elders kind of shit. So, I get
that,
it.
But I mean, in some ways, he felt like a very Western archetype to me, because his whole thing is being a scholar, but it's a very colonial idea of scholarship, right? He always positions himself as an expert in what's going on, regardless of how foreign it is to him.
Well, the thing is, they also structured, basically how everything works out is that he studied kind of the core of what a bunch of other cultures are, like, based off of, just from a Western point of view in this kind of comparison. Like, you go to Japan-ish and the tribal wolf people, and they're just like, we have these powers, and Kraden's just like, I have an explanation for this because this is what I call it. And that's a lot of what his role is like, oh yeah, everyone kind of has this shit. We just have the specific name for it. And since we're the protagonists, that's what's quote unquote right.
Yeah, specifically with the werewolf tribe, when you get there, there's a scene that I actually thought was a really clever, well-constructed scene where the werewolf elder is trying to explain why he's accepted that he's a werewolf. And he says, this is the way I am, and it comes from nature, and it's part of nature, and there's nothing intrinsically wrong with it. And Kraden's trying to impose this value judgment on it of, no, you're not normal. Your way of being is weird. Why don't you see it that you're weird? And the elder says, if you think about this, it becomes obvious that there's nothing wrong with this. So clearly you haven't thought about it much. And Kraden goes, what do you mean? I'm a scholar. I've thought about everything properly. Which is a very Western academic response to problems, especially in anthropology, I think. But generally, that's a thing we Western academics do, is get offended when it's suggested that our prior knowledge might have gaps in it.
Yep.
I thought that scene was really effective, but also from that moment on, I literally couldn't stand Kraden at all, ever.
Because it reminded you too much of coworkers?
And like me when I was younger. I hope I've grown out of that a bit. Transitioning helped. But that urge to position yourself as an expert is such a gross and a terrible thing, and Kraden does it all the time.
It's kind of... Go for it.
I was just going to say, that's the scene where it's really challenged, and I wish it was challenged more. I wish that challenge added up to something in the end.
Yeah. I was just going to say, that is kind of a display of toxic masculinity, but in the only way that, fucking academics can be expressed in the video game, pretty much. And, he is just a lore fountain, so, he has a use, but most of the time he's just kind of an academic to be an academic and be annoying.
Yep, that's what we do best.
Yeah.
God, we all know what kind of Twitter account Kraden would have.
One I don't follow.
Yep.
No, Neil deGrasse Tyson. What are you talking about? God.
But talking a lot about Kraden is kind of getting ahead of ourselves, because he does most of the talking in the second game, but he's not in the first game, apart from very early on.
Yeah. So basically, Isaac, Garrett, and Jenna, who is Garrett's sister. No, Felix's sister. I forgot, all the familial relationships don't terribly matter, except for Felix being Jenna's sister or brother. I'm bad at words today. It's fine. They're siblings. That's yes. Words. Okay, so the storm happens. Isaac, who is the protagonist of the first game, loses his dad. Jenna loses her parents and Felix. So 3 years later, Isaac, Garrett, and Jenna go up to Soul Sanctum at Mount Aleph, which is the mountain their village is at the base of, and they accidentally solve all the puzzles and get into the inner sanctum where a bunch of people were trying to get into 3 years earlier that caused the storm and the disaster. When they get in there, they discover the elemental stars, which are the source, the crystal that houses the spark that will relight alchemy throughout the world.
Where alchemy in this case just means magic. It's not thematically evocative of what we normally call alchemy.
Well, it kind of is, but it's also magic. It has the 4 classical elements, and they're also assigned planets. Venus is the earth, and Mercury is water, Mars is fire, and Jupiter is wind and lightning. So they get in there. Kraden's just I have bags for these because I've wanted to look for these my entire life, because if you get them together, they make the Philosopher's Stone, basically. So he's just go get them, please! I can't do all this platforming, I'm an old man. So you go do that, and after the third one, a group of people shows up and holds Jenna and Kraden, who are staying on the platform, hostage. And it's revealed that one of them is Felix, back from the supposed grave. And this also hints that his parents, and Jenna's parents, and Isaac's dad aren't necessarily dead. So they collect the last star, and after handing over the elemental stars in return for their safety, which falls through, but they get the last star, and the entire place starts falling apart, and they're saved by a rock with an eye called the Wise One. They get out of there. The village shaman tells them, well, the Wise One has sent me a psychic message. It's telling me that you need to go on a quest to stop the lighthouses from being lit by these things. So that's what they do. That is the premise for the entire duology, is that Isaac is setting off on a quest. Felix is being dragged along by Satros and Minardi, who are the 2 people that survived the previous attempt to get into the sanctum. And Felix eventually takes up their mantle in the Lost Age after the end of the first game when Isaac kills them. There's lots of smaller beats that we could probably go over.
Well, I think rather than going through the smaller beats one by one, because in a way it's very Dragon Quest where you go to a location and you solve their problem. I think what it's worth saying, particularly with like at the start of Golden Sun, the first 3 or 4 towns, there's a very clear sense that the world is out of balance. So you trigger this volcanic eruption that releases all the Djinn and starts the process of unleashing alchemy on the world, and the first few towns you get to have all been affected by that, but also already had problems.
Yeah.
And to start with, it does a very good job of giving you this impression of something not being right with the world, which turns out to be the main kind of driving force behind the plot, is the world is slowly dying. And some of those, like you go to the forest, and the balance between the humans who live in the village in the forest and the forest has been upset by a human chopping a tree that he shouldn't have, and in revenge the tree has cursed all the villagers to turn into trees, and you have to sort that out. And there's lots of bits like that. And the other thread that stitches it together are a series of character tensions, most of which are actually, they're not massively sophisticated, but they're substantive in their own way. There are stakes for some of the characters. I'm thinking particularly of Ivan's, the long-running thing where Ivan needs to rescue his master, Hammett, which you can't do till right near the end of the first game because of the abilities you need in order to get him out. But the first game does quite well at having a living sense of the world, especially for like a fairly graphically simplistic GBA game. That's kind of what I felt was lacking in The Lost Age. The places are a lot less distinctive and a lot more isolated. I
feel like distinctive's not the right word, because they have, to me, they felt like it's like a Disneylandification is what I'd call it, where they're like representing this specific culture. They're caricatures of a culture, so then they're like hyper specific, and they don't necessarily relate to the things around them very well, except you're touring through this place.
I guess I suppose I passed them all, or almost all the places you go to in Lost Age, as basically racist caricatures of quote-unquote tribal living styles.
Yeah.
And honestly, they kind of felt interchangeable to me because of that. Like, I didn't feel like the differences in appearance were significant, but equally, I was in a bit of a rush to get through it, so I wasn't talking to the locals a lot. And I know that there are some little bits of plot lines here and there that I missed out on, or that I only got the ends of.
There's actually so much NPC dialogue because you can mind read everyone.
Yeah, one of the features is basically a second layer of dialogue.
There's a lot of effort in making the speaking styles of all the peoples actually different in the localization too, so they're trying to make them all really distinct.
Yeah.
But the kind of flowing unified culture of Vale is a lot more evocative because it also doesn't come from a place of racism either.
Yeah, I had a train of thought and I lost it. What was I going to say?
This is like a reductive statement, but I like Golden Sun's story a lot just because a lot of the lore stuff is not explicit and it's not demystified like it is later. And when you don't exactly know what's happening, it's a lot more interesting in a way. Like there's enough hints that you can piece it together and come to your own conclusions.
Yeah, it's not when you get to the reveal, like the first time you hit one of the places where you can learn that actually, yes, the world is dying, it makes sense. It stitches some things that you've already encountered together. And it's because the actual kind of textual reveal is really late, it's quite slow burning, and I appreciate that. Like, you just get more and more data points in this world something seems wrong here with the way this world is, or something seems unexplained.
Also, like, one of the event that sets off the Lost Age is literally a tidal wave, just a wave, because of an earthquake, pushes a continent into its neighbor, which shouldn't happen. The game definitely starts with, like, a peninsula getting ripped off its continent and just kind of drifting, but then another tidal wave pushes an entire continent into its neighbor, which is just like, wow, that's fucked up, and also not how tectonic plates work.
Yeah.
Well, the world, like, reforms into a supercontinent, which is also a weird way of looking at now we're back to how it's supposed to be or whatever.
No, this is not how it's supposed to be. Like, there's not enough room, so it's crowding all its shit together. That's the point of the scene in Lemuria where they have the maps.
I couldn't understand the scene in Lemuria, but I thought what they were showing is that the continent used to be bigger and there were more continents also all stuck up against each other.
There's more literal physical space for the continents to be in, and there's less now, so they're jammed closer together, which means that...
Because that's established because the Falls and Wayard are actually dumping the entire world off the side of the world, which is like... I don't know what that means.
Gaia Falls is literally... It's falling off Gaia.
Yeah, I kind of thought that probably what the idea was that just the waterfalls were eroding the edges of the world.
Or it's a floating continent, I guess, possibly.
Nah. Like, the entire thing they try to push is that the world is alive and it's not getting fed, so it's just hibernating and dwindling away, which is like... kind of a weird allegory if you want to go that way, but like literally it's happening in this. So
the first Golden Sun's like really breezy, pretty straightforward, and the levels are pretty short, so like it doesn't really drag or doesn't really linger too long. Even when it's like, it's not like the most substantial game, but it goes at such a clip that, I'm not really thinking about it that much. I'm just taking in the sights and the sounds.
And it's very straightforward about what your motivations are for everything you're doing. Every time you go to a place, there's a reason you're going there. And there's a thing you're looking for. And when you get to the big confrontations, you know how you've ended up there. You don't really know what's going on because Isaac is still figuring things out. It's trying to kind of work out what's going on. But... there's a sense that you are moving in the direction of an explanation, which is, it's a conventional structuring principle, but it works, and I think it works fairly well. Although every cutscene is still like 10 text boxes too long.
Sorry, I hate the cutscenes.
Golden Sun does a thing where when you're in a cutscene, there's nothing impressionistic about the dialogue at all. Everything has to be spelled out. So all the little conversational nuances that you'd have in an ordinary conversation with real human beings are there. But that's not how you write conversations in fiction. Certainly it's very unusual to see that kind of style of conversation in a game.
I can kind of flesh that out. Camelot also made like Shining Force and Shining Force 2 on the Genesis, and like those were kind of trying to be, there's a quote on the wiki page which is like the director getting mad that they got compared to Fire Emblem all the time because they wanted to make it more like Dragon Quest, but it's tactical, so people were very reductive. But this is kind of their like Beyond the Beyond existed, but this is the one that like actually got support, so they think this is their real push to be like, we're gonna make this normal ass RPG and we're gonna make it with our style, and that style includes kind of extra bits of conversations that you probably wouldn't hear in most games around that time, or even now. You wouldn't see him written down anyway.
Yeah, definitely not.
You might hear him in voice acting, but
I don't think, like, in Golden Sun, it's not like the characters are expressing personality or just telling jokes or adding on to things. They're usually just, like, expressing disbelief and then repeating the same things, like, a second time.
Well, also, like, it's a meme that in Metal Gear Solid, Snake repeats everything with a question mark.
Yeah, but that's camp. In Golden Sun, it's decidedly not camp.
It's how the fucking Japanese people talk. That's just the point I'm pushing at. And the localization did a decent job, but didn't want to, like, remove text boxes because that was probably too much effort. So it comes off like that. Like, it works in Metal Gear Solid because that's campy as hell, and this is just trying to tell a straightforward fantasy story, and it doesn't really work here.
But other JRPGs don't sound like that. The only one I could think of, like, the only pro style that's similar to Golden Sun in my mind is Persona 5, where the characters belabor point for a long time and then expel it out and then say the same thing again when another character expresses disbelief of the thing they just said.
Yeah, I know. This is also from 2001.
But, well, I mean, yeah, that looks worse on Persona 5 than Golden Sun, but props to the text engine, though. I really liked how the way the text boxes were arranged, depending on, like, how the dialogue was stated or where the character was standing. Final Fantasy VII does that, too, but it's something that's, like, usually not done as much anymore.
Yeah.
I hadn't picked up on that. That's interesting. So, what develops over the course of the first game is this... In a way, it's quite nice that you have Saturos and Minardi, and they are clearly villainous. You know, they radiate menace, and you have this tense building confrontation, and when you get to them, you just fight them at the end of the game. And you deal with them, and, okay, they get their objective, but you win the fight. Pretty straightforwardly. And then it moves on to the second game, where nobody stays dead, and there are no consequences for anything.
Well, no, Saturos and Minardi stay dead for some reason.
They do, but, like, nobody who's important in the second game, stays dead. Babby's actually the other character who stays dead is Babby, who's an important character in the first game.
And is also dies of old age off screen.
Yes. But he does die.
Yeah.
Can anybody explain to me who Sheba is?
Sheba's just an orphan.
Yeah,
like,
that
has mystic powers. Like, she's just as, like, that's it.
Yeah. Because when you first start, she's introduced towards the end of Golden Sun 1, and the characters who are talking about it talk about it like she's, like, really super important in some way. Like, she's a destined priestess or something. But she just comes out of nowhere and then gets attached to what becomes Felix's party in the second game. And it's never really explored until you actually encounter her backstory. And then it's explained, oh, she's got all this like angsty backstory with being an orphan and stuff. And what? Why was she needed, and why has she been tagging along all this time?
Because you needed Jupiter Adept.
My horrible theory is that she is Ivan's sister's illegitimate daughter, or they're like possibly half sisters, or I don't know, because they come from the same line and village apparently.
No,
Contigo.
She's just a Jupiter Adept. Those can happen like anywhere.
It didn't seem established. It seemed like only the descendants of Animos could use Jupiter, and there was no one else in the game that was able to use Jupiter without using Djinns, obviously.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, they do establish that Sheba and Ivan are related, though, don't they?
No.
Don't they?
They don't.
He's related to Hama.
Yeah.
Huh. God knows. So,
like
somewhere
I said,
in one of those
familial relations are kind of whatever.
Golden Sun's lore doesn't give a shit anyways.
Yeah. Which is why people believed in the Wheat Sword for so long.
I believe in the Wheat Sword. I would say the most interesting part about the first Golden Sun is that it doesn't have a ship moment, basically. I know that doesn't sound interesting, but it's interesting because there aren't really any console RPGs, 2D RPGs that lack the ship moment. So Golden Sun is just this like really tense straight line through these. Yeah, it's pretty straight line through these like setup areas, and you get to experience these emotional beats and these like really crafted levels. And there's no chance of. I mean, there's no non-linearity going on. There's no Dragon Quest. Here's a ship. Now what do? You're always moving forward.
And the one place where there is a really significant backtracky bit, which is when you go back to rescue Hammett. As it happens, the linear path brings you back almost to the closest you ever are to that location in the story.
And then gives you a bridge.
Just as you get the abilities you need, you're in the best place in the world map to go to that from.
Mm-hmm.
It's very deft in its use of space, the first game. And I think this goes with the point about the ship. It is a game that's really invested in making you feel every step you take. That's not just on the world map, where in the second game there's a deliberate sense of trying to create a sense of exploring a new area that is, for your background, completely uncharted. But also, when you start exploring it, particularly once you get the ship, there's lots of reasons to backtrack.
Mm-hmm.
And to go exploring a huge area and then track back to, for example, where the legendary smith is,
Yalem.
so you can get your rusted weapon, Yalem, so you can get your rusted weapons reforged. And it makes you do a lot of trekking on the world map. But it also makes you do a lot of trekking in dungeons, and the dungeons are full of places where there's a room layout which has paths that would be short paths, but they're blocked. So you can't go up them, but you can see that there should be a path there, but you have to go round. And there's clearly some deliberate attempt there to make travel feel like a major significant part of the experience. I don't think it's just a cynical gameplay stretching thing. I think there must be an element of that, but I don't think it's the most important part of that. But also, ultimately, it just felt annoying to me to be constantly going around in circles. And for a few times in the puzzles, for them to have designed it in such a way that not just a neutral fact of how the puzzle had been laid out, but a specifically programmed thing forced you to go the long way around. Like you'd spot, oh, this might be a quicker solution that would require less trekking, but something would rule that solution out that had to be specifically put in place to do so and wasn't otherwise part of the puzzle. Particularly the Lost Stage becomes a very laborious game. Also, the encounter rate gets to Breath of Fire levels.
What I was going to say about the Last Stage is that it's actually like super literally Dragon Quest 3, which Dragon Quest 3 is, I don't know if it's the best-selling Dragon Quest game in Japan, but it's the most beloved, and in fact, it's like, you know how in America everyone asks for a remake of Final Fantasy VII? In Japan, they're constantly asking for a HD remake of Dragon Quest 3 of all things.
Wow. I mean, I guess that probably goes some way to explaining why the game is the way it is, then.
Yeah. Dragon Quest 3 has, I would say it has like 5 or 6 hours of really controlled linear, you're propelled through this part of the game until you get a ship, and then, I mean, as ship moments go in Dragon Quest, there's no indication of what you're supposed to do next, or where you can go, and you can feasibly go to most parts on the map, which is kind of how the last stage works out. They cut off half the map so you're not overwhelmed, but you can basically go to any of the places in any order you want.
I actually, like, when you get the ship, the first place you can explore is the Eastern Sea. There's 2 seas, the Eastern Sea, then the Western Sea. And I actually really liked the Eastern Sea. Just as a collection of places, it felt like you look at the map and it's a manageable area, but with loads of places to hit. And there's a lot of flexibility in hitting them and a variety of things to do.
It has a really pleasing map shape too. I mean, I think at the end of the draw of the last stage is something I rarely do in JRPGs. It's where you're like supposed to play without a walkthrough and make those connections yourself and explore and stumble onto Aqua Rock. You know, that stuff is cool, except I have no patience to ever do anything like that.
Yeah, I can't imagine how long this would have taken me if I wasn't sticking like glue to a walkthrough about which places to go.
Because like what you need to go, like, or yeah, what you need to do and where you need to go is actually pretty dense and glacial, is the way what I've written down, and that it's non-obvious, and that's like if you talk to every NPC in the town, probably only one will point at where you're supposed to go next in true Dragon Quest fashion. And the world maps are really not mapped out in a way that's intuitive, at least especially on the left half, and that you have to kind of land random places and walk down. Even when I was following walkthroughs, I didn't really understand how I was supposed to get to like the Shaman Village one time, or how I was supposed to even get to the Contigo, where you have to find the port town, the port town away from the actual town settlement. And it just kind of resists like obvious things or obvious construction.
With regards to the Shaman Village, I landed at like the port on Hesperia, like the Hesperia settlement. That's what it's called. And one of the people there was just like, one of these rivers is gonna fucking take you to Shaman Village, and it turns out all the rivers do. So worked out.
Yeah. The other thing with the opening of the Lost Age, when you like first wash up on the new continent, the first thing you've got to do is go to a bunch of locations and get abilities that are keys to other locations. So there is a set order that you have to do the first areas in, but you can very easily go to an area and see nothing that you can manipulate at all, and you can hit several areas and do that. And like, I get why that can be compelling, but it would also be really frustrating to me, I think. Like, some people have mentioned over the last month that they really bounced off the Lost Age, and I can see why.
In a game with reveal, I always feel... And the stuff with reveal is usually really obvious, too, but I always feel like I'm, like... Let's say I went to a place I wasn't supposed to go yet. I feel like I'm the problem when I can't solve something. I'm like, did I try all of my psi energy? Did I reveal in the right spot? Am I supposed to be here right now? Am I not supposed to be right now? And it's really... Like, I can't go down the list and hit all those things fast enough, or like, I'm not intuitive enough with the design language to be able to complete the puzzles in a way that doesn't like sit me in a spiral of I don't even know if I can progress here or not. And so if I didn't have a walkthrough, I probably would never be able to figure out where to go.
That was the feeling I had. I mean, like, I think it does give you that, even playing with the walkthrough a little bit, you get the feeling this is new, unexplored territory, and in some ways you're very out of your depth. But it's one of those things where it's hard to see how you create that experience in a way that isn't also a pain in the ass to play. I
mean, I can't count the number of times where I got stuck in a dungeon just because I missed the one tile that you can jump through or jump onto, or the one tile you can like pass under a stalagmite or something. Like something goofy, something they could have made it more obvious in the construction, but they purposely didn't.
I was just really bad at passing the platforming puzzles. I don't know what it was. When you get to a big room and there's one specific path that you have to follow, but there's loads of platforms in there to distract you from it, I would just lose the ability to track important jumps that I needed to make. The puzzles, I mean, a thing that happens as the Lost Age goes on is that the dungeons get more and more Zelda-ish, in that more and more you go through part of a dungeon being obviously blocked from certain things because you don't have a particular ability. Then you get the ability and you come back and you can do the rest of the dungeon. And that is satisfying. I always find that satisfying playing Zelda games. It was kind of satisfying here, but again, only because I had a walkthrough, so that I knew where I was not. Okay, that set of things are non-interactable, yet I will leave them be.
I didn't use a walkthrough for any of the puzzles. The only quote-unquote walkthrough I used was the Djinn list, which basically was like a checkpoint of where I need to go next, and how to get the Djinns, because otherwise it'd be impossible. And on that note, like, the Doom Dragon's actually ridiculously scaled up way hard. Like, it's just a lot harder than anything else in the entire rest of the game. So you have to get all the Djinns, but the game doesn't make it clear that you need to get all the Djinns. It pretends it's this optional thing that if you don't get them, you're screwed.
It's one of those, like I said in the lead up to this, like, you could skip getting all the Djinns, but I would not want to play this with the minimum amount of Djinns at all. Yeah.
I skipped the last 4 Djinn because I was planning to go with a 4-character strat, which was a bad idea. But also, I got Djinnstormed twice in the Doom Dragon fight.
I got Djinnstormed only once.
I got 0.
I literally had just the turn of the second Djinnstorm would have been the turn, and I completed my recovery from the first one. And I hate you both so much.
The thing was, I peppered my Djinn usage with the prevent a turn, because Djinnstorm always pops on the first turn of the Doom Dragon's fight when it gets into its final phase. So just like, well, if I just kind of sprinkle these no, you don't get a first turn Djinn, this will save me the trouble, and it worked out.
I guess might as well talk about the battle system, right? Or you can finish first.
Well, I was about to get into that, because obviously the big thing with the Djinn system in this is when you have Djinn equipped, they boost your stats. If you use the Djinn's ability, you lose that boost to your stats until the Djinn is reset to you, to the character.
They go into standby.
They can be summoned. Summons can be very powerful, but I was really worried about letting my stats drop against the dragon, so I was being really conservative in my use of Djinn, with the net result that I wasn't using abilities like that maybe would have helped me not get Djinnstormed twice.
Yeah.
Because when you get Djinnstormed, you lose. So Djinnstorm is an ability that strips away all Djinn from a character or your entire fucking party.
It's Djinn Blast for one character, Djinnstorm for the entire party.
Yeah, I got blasted multiple times, but stormed only once.
Only 2 things can use Djinnstorm: the Doom Dragon's final form and the Dolahan, which I did get Djinnstormed on that fight. It didn't go well. I was panicking the entire time. Becky can attest to that. It took 15 minutes. I was screaming.
That was a hell of a stream, I gotta admit. That was, I guess, me getting Djinnstormed twice after having enjoyed watching you suffer through that is probably karma. But, also, goddamn.
And also,
so that's 2 games in 2 consecutive months Becky hasn't finished, because,
Yeah, at least you got to the very end this time, and you were also around for me finishing it, but...
Oh, did you not beat the Doom Dragon?
I wiped after a half-hour fight.
RIP.
Not fucking doing this again.
That's fair.
And then I crushed it.
I only did it because I had enough mist potions to squeeze my crappy comp through. But I was right when I got Djinnstorm the first time, I was like, oh fuck, and I was just switching back and forth between my way weaker other party and just trying to eke out a win.
I was also higher level than everyone. I was 4 levels higher than Becky, I think.
Not quite that much, but yeah, something like that.
I mean, you said you were level 39 and I was level 42 to 43.
Oh wow.
I dinged 40 before reaching the dragon.
Okay.
I was under 40.
Yeah.
Ouch. My B party were low 30s, which was the problem, because once I got Djinnstormed, I couldn't bring people in to res or anything.
I was under 40 because I leveled my other party, so that's why I could switch between them pretty decently.
Yeah. Your overall average might well have been higher than mine then.
Yeah,
which
probably.
Would count for a lot. Because the system has the ability to swap party characters, which is really good.
Yeah.
I didn't use it much, but it's good that it's in there.
Also, I imported my party at level 30, and my Lost Age crew was at level 30, so they were just on level, but that was because I did some extra grinding to make sure the streams would go well by drowning a lizard over and over and over again.
I think the Djinnstorm was the funnest part I had in the game, though, because I had to...
The panic you enter when that happens, it's just
I forgot it was in the game.
You play Final Fantasy games on active.
Yeah, I do.
I'm going to keep coming back to this.
I forgot that was in the game when that happened. I was like, oh shit, I'm going to lose. Oh man, what do I do?
Devon being hit with that was very much that expression as well. Yeah,
and it's so extreme because. Like, for most of the game, like, once I figured out how all the stat scale and how it works, I just left my gens on because physical damage does way more damage, or physical attacks do way more damage than spells, and summons do % damage, so they're only effective against bosses, and it's not really worth using them unless you...
Summons do flat damage based on your stats, and also HP based on the target.
Yeah, so. But just like magic, it only scales with your quote-unquote elemental power or affinity or whatever, which you can't increase except through equipment or using summons, so it's like negligible.
A fun thing I did was like I would just have like Mia fucking summon just whatever garbage she had from like using Djinn to heal people of status effects and shit, and then she would get a boost to heal, and then Wishwell would heal for like 300 fucking HP. It's just like, oh, that's good.
I never really got my head around the ins and outs of like having a stat for every element.
I mean, it just means if you use synergy of that element, effect boost. That's it.
But the best way to do a summon is just to leave. Just if you know the boss is coming up, turn all your gens off, and then start the fight with a bunch of summons, and then just use the physical synergy because they do more damage. And so, I mean, that's how I was playing the game. Like, I would like to see a game where you have to actually, where you need to use your gens, and you have to have this. There's this tempo where you're going in and out of being very powerful to very frail, and you have to manage that. But Golden Sun's not like that, and instead they just go to extreme lengths to, like, you're using these gens the whole game, and they just turn them off, which is like a way to force the challenge, I guess. And I liked it, but it's also pretty much bullshit.
I mean, I was flowing out of being weak and strong in the Doom Dragon fight, but I also wasn't getting Djinnstormed because I was like rationing out those cancellations. I was vetoing the shit out of that Djinnstorm. Also, something we should talk about the Djinn, which is part of the battle system. Depending on your composition of Djinn on a character, they will change class. It depends. Like, there's single element, which means the character has the Djinn that is appropriate for their inherent element. There's dual element, then there's tri, and then there's quad, when they have the additional ones to make up for their, like, there's ninja, which is like, if you give an earth elemental fire, water, and wind, 3 of each to get the top tier. I like the class system, but also I feel like the summons don't cooperate with it a lot in terms of, like, ratios of Djinn that are good to summon.
Also, a lot of, like, there's a lot of classes, like, say you have a class that can use Wish, and you deactivate one Djinn, and now you're fucked, you don't have Wish anymore. So it's...
Yeah.
It's not really something... Yeah, they don't really cooperate, and most of the time you just want to leave your Djinn on, so you can just do a straightforward fight.
Or leave enough on. Like, I only ever got up to 3 Djinn into standby in Golden Sun 1, because that left me 4, like, water Djinn so I could do Wishwell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like all the summons. I like this set of mechanics, and I just wished that, like, the summon ratios, you could restrict whether they pulled from other characters, because they all contribute to, like, a set Djinn pool, which is cool, but also, if I want, like, this character with fucking 6 Mars and 3 Jupiter to use those Mars and Jupiter for a summon and not some other character's Mars and Jupiter, I should be able to set that. And I think that's just kind of an artifact of this being a really kind of a fucked up system. Like, honestly, this is a weird ass system. And the fact that it functions like this at all is neat. But I would definitely see some improvements if I were to go back to it. I haven't played Dark Dawn. I really doubt they fixed that in Dark Dawn.
They didn't.
Yeah.
My brother's played Dark Dawn. He says, like, everything good about Golden Sun, it's in Dark Dawn. Everything that's bad about it, it's still in Dark Dawn. Yeah. And that's like his response to a lot of fans say it's like a way worse follow-up, but he's like, it's just Golden Sun. Everything
it's just more of the same.
Yeah, everything you think is wrong about it, that's the same with originals. You're just too young to care.
Yeah, I want to play Dark Dawn for that reason, because I wouldn't mind playing more of the same with a different cast, honestly. But that's me. You two would probably pass on it.
Well, actually, like, to go back to the plot, and we do need to still talk about the ending.
I guess we do, yeah.
I kind of feel the big problem I have with Lost Ages ending, and it does lots of things that annoy me, the big problem I have is it feels like the bit you do is really only the end of Act 2. You know, you show up at the final lighthouse and light it, and the remaining elements that are in the world, which are massive, weird problems that call into question what you've been doing and who you've been allied with and what good in the world is. I was expecting Alex to be the final boss, or to summon the final boss.
That would have been good.
You don't even fight Alex, right? He's on the other side of the world. And you don't fight the wise one either. who turns out to be evil.
Well, not necessarily evil.
Complicated, lawful neutral.
Yeah.
What he does
He's evil.
at the end of that
or
he's
they're evil, it's evil.
It's evil, yeah. I really feel like, even with it having already had to be broken up into 2 games, it feels like there was more plot to be done. It feels like that there needed to be a third act. Okay, we've lit all the lighthouses, that's thrown the world into complete chaos, and now we've got to make our way through, a World of Ruin section, basically. But now we've got to make our way through the World of Ruin to confront the actual evil that is trying to exploit this crisis that has been created.
See, actually, the main complaint about Dark Dawn is when it ends, it feels like there should be another act after it, too.
So it's possible that the Golden Sun team is just bad at endings, then?
It's possible.
No, they were trying to pitch for a 4th game with Dark Dawn, and it's not been picked up, so...
Right. Okay.
Like, it's 30 years after this. It's not an immediate sequel. It's
okay.
3 decades. You play as the group's kids. Isaac's a dad. He married Jenna, and Jenna does not appear. Video game?
Of course, yeah.
But yeah, I get you, but also I feel like the 2 big bads getting into a punching match, and then the bigger bad being like, no, you idiot, and then just... sending him into hell. The mountain descends into hell, and Alex goes with it. Except probably not, because Dark Dawn.
I like Alex's fate, actually. That was actually really Lynchian. The problem is, Golden Sun is not at all Lynchian, so I don't know why that happened to him. It just seemed out of place for the game, but I would have liked that anywhere else.
It's a great comedy scene where he's on top of the mountain going, I take all the power, and then he uses the power, and nothing happens. And he uses the power again, and all he does is, push the wise one, a foot.
And then the wise one just goes...
It's so funny and anticlimactic, but Golden Sun's just not that kind of game to pull off beats like that. So it's that's why it stands out.
Yeah. I guess, something that baffled me as I was playing the game, just purely from an experiential point of view, you get to the end of Golden Sun, and then you start Lost Age, and you jump into Felix's shoes. And Felix, in Golden Sun, has a definite set of motivations. You don't know what they are, but the game is very clear that he has a purpose and maybe some sense of conflict about his purpose and a complex inner life. And then you step into his shoes, and he's a completely faceless, voiceless character, non-entity. But you still have to pursue his goals. Nobody else is supplying those goals. And all the direction is coming from Kraden, who is notionally a hostage.
Well...
And okay, Kraden's got his own agenda.
Yeah.
But Kraden's agenda doesn't line up exactly with Felix's. And the way Kraden expresses that agenda is not a product of Felix's motivations at all. Because Felix's motivations are, my parents are held hostage. And Kraden doesn't make reference to that.
They actually hide those motivations until the very end of the game for no reason, no discernible reason.
I don't think Kraden knows that Felix's parents are being held hostage.
I think he knows, or at least they imply that he knows. In a sense that Kraden and Felix talk about their secret motivations, or at least they say they do.
They have off-screen conversations, which is like, what the fuck?
Calling part is these characters are talking about how they're going to keep a secret from you're supposed to be identifying with this character. That's what. Yeah,
I still think the fact that the silent protagonist is a communicable disease is fucked up.
It's so
wrong.
When I first played Golden Sun, I screamed when Isaac talked. I was like, "What is this? Why is he allowed to talk and Felix isn't?" Because no one told me it was going to happen, and I just flipped. I was like, this is so dumb!
It is. I'm not going to be stupid enough to defend that. I think both of them should have been talking more. It would have made Golden Sun feel more alive, I think.
God, yes. I mean, this is a consistent GGC stance, right?
No silent protagonist.
No silent protagonist. Silent protagonists are kind of bad.
If I came up to Isaac and he also went ... right back to my ... that would have been funny as shit, and I would have accepted it. That would have been fine.
That alone would have justified the weirdo ending.
That would have been a mute protagonist. That's different. A silent protagonist is saying things, but not that the player can hear. A mute protagonist is actually mute.
The funniest thing would have been if you communicated entirely in dialogue prompts. Just, yes. Why are there dialogue choices in this game?
You know, the game actually keeps track of your dialogue choices too, like as in flags, as in if you agree or disagree with Garrett enough times, Garrett will comment on that in the first game. And that happens also with Kraden, where he will like respond to Felix based on how often Felix does or doesn't agree with him. And I don't know why they did all that effort, because it doesn't do anything. It's not really, they're not even more expressive. They just have one line where, oh, finally you're agreeing with me. And I'm just like, I don't say anything ever!
Oh, God.
Yes, no, shrug. That's the new dialogue choice we need.
Sure, do it anyway, because that's clearly what's going to happen, because I'm not the writer of the game. Every dialogue choice should come with a third option that is make the fucking writer do the work.
Actually, that's... So you know how Telltale... Or you've played Telltale games, have you?
I have played a single act of the Borderlands one.
For some reason, they let you always answer every dialogue prompt with ...
Yeah, they always let you play silent.
And so I was watching Max play the Game of Thrones Telltale game, and just at every single prompt, we chose not to answer anything. And the game was awful, and I guess that's my case against Silent Protagonist.
Yeah.
I mean, it might just have been awful because it's Game of Thrones, and Game of Thrones is awful.
It might also just be awful because it's Telltale.
All of it together, but it just like threw off the pacing and the tone for the characters to just not say anything whenever they're confronted or asked a question.
I wrote a fucking thing about Silent Protagonist like fucking 3 years ago now, or some shit.
It's still good.
The thing about Silent Protagonist is they're only good when the game itself is silent. If everything's silent, if all the characters are silent, then I'm not going to be upset, because there's no prerogative. Like, that's not how the diegesis, that's not how the narrative works, so it doesn't matter that one character or all the characters don't speak. And I mean, what I'm talking about is Eastern Odyssey. It doesn't matter that the characters can't speak, because, you know, the plot's more just walking through the spaces.
Yeah.
But Golden Sun is really fucking verbose for the character to never say anything.
And the characters have distinctive internal motivations that there's no room for them to ever express.
Yeah.
And that are never communicated first person to the player at all.
Like, fucking Kraden mentions it when Isaac rejoins the party, like, oh yeah, you were too stuck up being used to the Vale Village rules to get why we're doing this. And it's just like, would have been nice to fucking show that more often, because that's not super visible at all.
Also fucking rich coming from Kraden.
Fucking
Kraden.
Fucking academics. This is your people, Becky.
I know.
Get your man. Just get him out of here.
My feelings on The Last Age is it's like the album of a progressive rock band, but not like the early defining period, but it's like their later ones. Their later ones where they're self-referencing their own material a lot. And so, I mean, if you love Dragon Quest III particularly, you play this game, it's going to be really appealing, but like, otherwise, if you're not looking for that specific JRPG feeling, it's hard to get a lot out of it. But I kind of mean that literally, because the dungeons, the levels are like, I would actually compare them to prog rock. Like they're really long, exhausting, but they're deliberate. They have like these movements in the environment and in like their emotional tells. Like you go on the kind of the build up and the outside of Aqua Rock, and then once you solve the puzzles up there, you get sucked into the interior of it, where like kind of like the dramatic like stuff's starting to happen kind of part of the level, and then you wound out into like more abstract, more meditative, more I'm connected with nature part, where you get to the inner sanctum and you learn your synergy, and like there's this like a clear 3-act structure to pretty much all the dungeons in the game. And when you do the first couple, it's really, really nice. I loved Ares Rock and even Aqua Rock. But then you go into like, I don't know, the Dumb Tower where you get the Trident, and it's kind of the same structure. And then you have to do Magma Rock and Gaia Rock later, and they're kind of just the same thing. I wouldn't call them slight variations, but substantially and conceptually, there's not anything else going on. So like you're doing this hours long of kind of the same concept again, and that's kind of what I mean by the, you know, late prog rock album.
I think it's interesting that this is a handheld game, so it has a save anywhere function, as was becoming more and more popular after...
Praise the Lord for that.
After Pokemon kind of was just like, hey, we can do this, let's do this, and then other developers were like, oh, so that's more common, and it's in here. And I think that it's interesting that they didn't try to, like, make the dungeons a lot shorter, because they know that you can, at any point, save and take a break. Like, they don't need to pace out based on, like, you need a save point here, here, and here, so that people can take a break getting through these dungeons.
My counter to that is if I took a break in some of those dungeons and came back to it, I would have literally no idea what I was doing.
Yeah, I think that by itself is a very good argument for why save points work, why they're not just a compromise for technology's sake. And like I was rereading an article recently that was like, save points are so anachronistic and no game should have save points anymore. It's like, no, actually, sometimes it's really useful to break up a space in that way.
Like, I kind of agree with that in some ways, but I think I said this before. This is probably like the RPG that made me think about RPGs as a thing. Before I had played a bit of Final Fantasy, like 4, labeled as 2, and like I've seen a bit of Final Fantasy 7 and 9 around, but this was the first time I was just like, this is a neat genre, and I could play this. And I played it a lot, and this has kind of formed my spatial understanding of like dungeon creation and stuff. So I am probably going to be a little like weak on this, but also I've only played through the Lost Stage once, and not counting the stream. And when I did the stream, I only needed like some pointers on where to go in the world map kind of thing. And whenever I did puzzles, whenever I did dungeons and puzzles, I just kind of was in tune with what the game was precisely wanting out of me. So I think this is just a matter of like me being in tune with it, but I could save and come back and remember what I was doing in the dungeon fairly easily.
Fair representation. I was playing the game. I was browsing Twitter, browsing Discord, reading articles, and listening to music while playing Golden Sun. So I wasn't paying the strictest of attention on what I was doing, and so I got lost a lot because there are some dungeons where the hallways look kind of the same, and I just actually like, oh my god, have I gone through here? Which way am I supposed to be going?
I got lost a lot and I was concentrating.
That's all my fault. I know if I focus really hard, I can map it all out, because I just mapped out all of Middens, and that game's like surreal Yuminiki style dungeons, but I couldn't.
I had a couple bits near the end, which was the part of the game I was least familiar with, where I had to look up a map of like Mars Lighthouse, but that place is like an actual nightmare to go through when you're not following the progression, because I missed a single chest, and that single chest had a piece of armor in it that boosts your critical and unleash rate by 20%. And I was just like, oh, I'm giving that to Isaac, who has the Soul Blade. He's gonna unleash so many souls on that Megiddo shit. But I had to figure out like half of the dungeon again.
Yeah.
But I didn't have all the guideposts of like, I haven't gone through here. No, everything's open. I just don't know where fuck anything is. So
puzzles that reset after you've completely solved them can fuck off too.
Yeah.
You know, some of the puzzles are designed so that if something goes wrong, you have to leave the room to reset them.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the puzzles are designed so that if you want to backtrack, you have to unsolve and resolve the puzzle. Or if you want to get everything, you've got to solve the puzzle one way, unsolve it, reset it, and then solve it. This goes back to the point about the laboriousness of it, the making everything take as long as it can.
I that just reminds me of Colosso, because that Colosso is that in miniature, and it sums it up perfectly. Because like, you could take shortcuts and do all this stuff, but also, even if you take all these shortcuts and do everything optimally, you still gotta go out of your way, and sometimes even resolve the puzzles to get items in chests that odds are you won't need. Like, there are a lot of the chests later on in Lost Age aren't filled with anything useful unless they're filled with crafting materials, which is like a shot at being useful.
Or occasional equipment. Even in the last dungeon, there are a few pieces of equipment that are really useful to have.
Yeah, like the armor I mentioned. That unleash rate. 2/3 of the time, I'm going to drop a sun on you. That's a good piece of armor. But yeah, Golden Sun. It's an early Game Boy Advance RPG that's very Dragon Quest-y. I like it.
It's Dream Theater.
This is the most Leroy analogy possible.
Yeah.
I used to be really bad where I'd always compare everything to music, but I've paired that off a lot. But it just feels really appropriate here. When I hear the technique on display from a lot of project bands, I'm like, wow, this is great. And then once I get through the 10-minute song, I'm like, no, I'm done. I'm exhausted.
Yeah, I feel that way about prog rock too, and I don't listen to it much.
But this is not really, I can't really defend my points here, because I'm a known puzzle hater. If I don't remember which podcast, I think it might even be the first Vectro podcast, but me and Max talked
I've definitely heard you talk about hating puzzles.
Yeah, we talked at length about how we hate puzzles. But the puzzles in general, and especially the last stage, they don't feel out of place, but they structure the game in like an alien way. It's hard to understand how the spaces exist and how they actually function in the world. They just seem like deliberate obstacle courses because they are, and they don't really have a sense of place except that you're going to solve them now. So like these, or like the Gaia's Rock or the Ancient Towers. I'm like, I wonder, did the ancient civilization set up all these puzzles? And I'm being like, this is like bullshit Reddit theory, but it just, when you go through a whole bunch of them, it doesn't reinforce the story very much.
I mean, there are other ways to read a puzzle in a game, and there are reasons to use puzzles that are impressionistic or effective rather than narrative. But I'm not sure that's at work in Golden Sun either.
Well, what broke the interpretation for me is there's a bunch of badly done tutorials. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but there's one where a mouse jumps on on the gears as if this place has a lot of mice on it, and they also jump on the gears like you need to. And I'm just like, this tutorial sucked. But then I'm like, that's when I got like, I was kind of just enjoying the game passively and not really thinking about the puzzles up to that point. And then I was like, oh my god, why the fuck are there, like, why am I solving all this random stuff inside on the thing? And then when you fixed it, it like, well, like the structures that let you fix it are just really video gamey, and it doesn't like actually connect to the lore at all, which it doesn't need to, I guess, but it doesn't help.
Yeah, there's no sense to why it is useful for the environments to be convoluted in that kind of actively obstructive way. You know, sometimes you understand why a game's environments are mazes. We talked about that in reference to Persona, for example. And sometimes you understand why a game's environments are puzzles. I think what makes a Zelda game work is a particular puzzle language. Certainly in kind of the classic 3D Zeldas and the classic 2D Zeldas have their very distinctive, here's how to interpret this space. And the space exists purely to be interpreted, because the narrative happens outside it to whatever extent the narrative is important. And the space is just there to give some sort of pacing or feel. But, you know, Golden Sun will often give you a reason to go into a dungeon. And the climax will be at the end of the dungeon, not after you come out of the dungeon with the widget. But why then make it so convoluted? What is the difference between having puzzles here versus just having you spend the time navigating a maze?
I mean, I think to think about my shitty point a bit more is like, Golden Sun's narrative is really straightforward. It's not really convoluted or complicated. So you're navigating all these like really methodical spaces, but like nothing else in the game reinforces that kind of methodical feel, or like the kind of analytical or engineering level, like those are weird words. I don't really know what words to use for puzzle solving. That you're doing in Golden Sun is not reflected in any other part of the game. So they're not really reinforcing each other. They're just like two parts you just kind of interact with back and forth.
Yeah.
It is decidedly a step up from, as I mentioned, Beyond the Beyond, which has some adventure game-ass bullshit with terrible encounter rates, which is itself a step more convoluted than Shining Force, which is basically just a tactics game with minor bits of, like, adventure game solving puzzles between tactics fights.
I think it's still better than Wild Arms too, and like Wild Arms puzzles are just actually distracting and bad.
Yeah.
And they're not established very well, and you just like get the dumb item to do the thing, and it's not really. A lot of the puzzles in the first Golden Sun are like that too, but they have a better sense of integrating those things into the space. But yeah,
and they're shorter. There's kind of less of them per dungeon, and they're less complicated.
But then they just have difficulty integrating the whole puzzle-solving sense into the rest of the scenario very well. How much of the story have we summed up, or do we even care?
There's one last thing I want to complain about.
I still have complaints. I haven't complained about the ending.
The other complaint I have is during the ending, not once but twice, the game tries to make you think that some characters who are important to your characters are dead, and then just turns around and says, oh no, we made that up.
This only comes up for like 5 minutes, too. That's why it's so ham-fisted.
I hate it so much. I hate that trope.
Well, I'm not advocating that the parents should have died in Golden Sun, but I think it just shouldn't have been on the table. You should not have put the parents dying, or I'm going to have to kill my own parents. That just shouldn't have come up. That shouldn't have been put into the game. The whole concept should just have been out. You know, we don't need to. It's not doing anything, and it's nothing else in the game relates to or even thematically broaches like these characters have to now kill their parents. It's just like shock that doesn't need to be in the game.
It would genuinely have been more effective to have you actually fight the wise one.
Yes, that's what I.
Except he's a demigod and you wouldn't win.
I mean,
well, that's because they wanted to do. I mean, you just change the lore, make it so he's not that strong.
That would undermine like the entire opening, though. Like with him holding back a volcano, can't manage that without making some ridiculous bullshit demigod rock.
Okay. He can even do the Doom Dragon, right? It just doesn't have to be the cadavers of your parents.
It's not cadavers. That's not how that works.
I mean, whatever. It's three bodies,
spirits,
their parents.
let's say, but yeah.
It's fucked up. It doesn't fit the tone of the game at all.
And then they explain it with the persona trick of, oh, maybe he was just testing you to see if you're good as avatars of mankind, which... That's such crap.
No, he couldn't be bothered to fight you while he was evacuating everyone else, but wanted to punish you for disobeying him. Like, that's how I read it.
I knew it was going to happen too, so when Kraden was like, oh no, I know something about this dragon, but it doesn't say anything.
Garrett, no, he's just like, no, you shouldn't fight that fucking dragon.
Fight
Garrett's
that dragon.
just like, well, it's a little too late. We surrounded it and are drawing swords, you fuck.
I didn't know in advance that was going to be the climax, and I still guessed immediately when Kraden said that, oh, this is the parents. Why the fuck are we fighting our parents?
I didn't guess the first
Because
time.
the wise one's a lawful asshole. That's why.
It's not
there
lawful.
Is no
There's
why.
nothing
There's
lawful
no
about
explanation.
that.
I can't think of any time where you're designing the final encounter of the game where you're like, they should fight a dragon. It's the fusion of all their parents. Like, what does that have to do with anything that happened in the game?
I mean, it was just the wise one punishing them for being disobeying him, I feel like. Because they were descendants of Vale and meant to follow his orders to the end, and they betrayed him.
I mean, besides, sure, they want to characterize the wise one as an asshole, but like, their sanctity of human life can just be, on the table still. It doesn't have to go that way. It doesn't have to be this eldritch horror abomination when, again, the game's not a horror game. The game's not about the sins Isaac does. They don't even give a shit about any of the bad things the characters do, except right at the end for some reason.
You completely get away with cheating at Colosso as well.
Well, not only that, you murder two people, and then when we go to their village, and they're like, well, you're the stronger warrior, so that's just how it goes. And I'm just like, oh, yeah.
Oh, fuck yeah. That goes back to the point about there being no consequences for anything. It's like, everything that gets in the way of the story just rolls over, and...
I mean, the story is we need to save the world, and
ultimately what frustrates me is that the culture that's the other, which is Saturos and Randy, they die. They fucking die. But your parents, I don't want them to die, of course, but they don't. They just come back to life because you're the heroes and you're the good other culture. You're the good right culture, so you guys get to live and have the happy ending. And I was like, okay, that's good. I'm glad all the Prox warriors had to die in the process, but everybody else has the happy ending. Like, you have the same goals. They had the same goals, but whatever.
And when you have the confrontation with the people of Prox about how you killed Saturos and Minardi, it's not a grudging acquiescence that they make to you. It's not, well, you killed our siblings and we're upset about that, but we recognise that we've got to band together for the sake of the world. It's, oh, you were the stronger warriors, therefore you should have won.
I talked to a lot of NPCs, so it was kind of implied that Saturos there was like a struggle for power going on, and Saturos was acting out of line with basically the governor or whatever the hell the leader of the town was, that he wanted to kidnap the people of Vale and do this thing, and they grudgingly agreed because they had nothing else they could do except put their trust into Saturos. But it still seems like that's just like slipshod. Here's the reason why Saturos had to die, even though no one in Prox is really even that bad, and nothing like what they were doing is about as evil, quote unquote, as Briggs, and Briggs gets to be comical, but these guys have to be like some kind of devil that you kill, I guess.
Their entire thing is that they are literally on the edge of the world that's being eaten away by Gaia Falls. So like they have a lot less time. Saturos was probably like, we don't have fucking time to put up with this shit. We need to kidnap some people. And they were just like, fucking, I guess we can't do anything else. And we don't like it, but we're going to do it. And then he got killed, and the people who killed him came back to do his job. So it was just like, fuck it, it's fine.
It's just, it just strikes me as like fantasy racism, basically.
It's also never really explained beyond like RPG mechanics why you're the only people who can do the lighthouses.
Because you have the items.
I think it's actually like they say out loud the word puzzles, as in these puzzles are things that people have to solve. And so what it seems to be is the characters are the only ones good enough, smart enough, have enough synergy.
Saturos and Minardi are not good at, like, Saturos and Minardi had to kidnap a Venus Elemental to get into Venus Lighthouse, and also they were bad at all the puzzles.
Because Alex taunts Karst and Agitio, and he's like, you guys are dumb and can't solve the puzzles, that's why they're here. And so, like, the puzzles are real, and I guess...
God, I had literally blanked all of that from my memory because it was so thoroughly unreconcilable with the puzzles themselves.
I mean, all the puzzles in the lighthouses are, like, only things that adepts can solve, and only adepts in compositions of, like, we have enough people to do shit. Instead of just, like, fucking fire adepts get, like, move. That's it. Like, that's all they get.
I wonder if there was a job for, like, the lighthouse keeper to have to reset all the goddamn puzzles.
No, it's magic. It's magic.
You see, the thing I'm thinking about now is, like, how incongruous that makes all the puzzles in the non-lighthouse dungeons. Right?
I don't know.
Okay,
puzzles
puzzles
just naturally happen in the world.
Then all the other puzzles seem weirder in like the naturalistic locations. Oh god!
Except all the naturalistic locations you go to are like sanctums built in naturalistic locations by ancient people who
not always. Sometimes they're just damn caves.
I suppose the caves tend to be the smaller dungeons.
The first Golden Sun, you solve puzzles in just caves and deserts. Like, there's no... I mean, what you could say is the influence of psi energy causes puzzles to naturally form.
Yeah, it's psi energy, not magic, so you gotta use your brain. Gotta get that psi up.
Psi.
Okay, I have one complaint about the whole thing in the last stage is that civilization, and apparently the Earth, but the way they frame it, Lemuria, is that
Lemuria.
Lemuria is that the civilizations are degrading, and the king the king and his advisors and whatever, they all make this value judgment that the simple villages they all encountered are bad for the world, for civilizations, and the complex ones of the past in Lemuria are the good ones. Like, no one questions that. No one goes, actually, the people there live pretty good lives. They're all like, yeah, you know what? They all fucking suck. And they just put that out as a coherent suggestion. Like, the more technology the civilization has, the obviously better they are. And so it's just like, I mean, really old Enlightenment area BS being reinforced there.
But, like, that's coming from a party of adepts who just have had all this ability given to them and developed over the course of the game so far. And they're just like, yeah, more people should be able to do more things. We're adepts. We don't have a critical eye.
It's also from writers who probably never thought about it in any complicated way. I mean, that's what I mean. It's just reinforcing.
Yeah. In a way, it's quite Silicon Valley, but it's also the recurring fantasy trope of the Lost Golden Age.
The Lost Age.
Well, yeah, but the idea that there's something that we need to restore. There's a better way in the past that we just need to go back to. When they say that the reason that Synergy had to be sealed away is not like there's no demon associated with it that would be unleashed. It's that human beings were using Synergy to inflict misery on one another. Synergy was sealed because we were misusing it.
I mean, that's literally all power.
I guess that is the only check on there, though. What pissed me off is, like, this game is saying the expansion of civilizations is gonna increase the net good of this planet, and it's gonna extend the life of the planet. And it's fantasy, and it's true in Golden Sun, but in the real world, we're facing I don't even need to be a Marxist about this. Like, global warming's happening, and the world's getting fucked up because of global trade going unchecked, and no one's regulating it, and irresponsible use of powers. And so, there's this optimistic human development by itself is going to save the world. It's just it's aged or it's bullshit. Or, I mean, I just did not appreciate it being stated like that.
Yeah,
it's definitely a 2000 outlook.
Yeah, right. Does that cover it?
Yeah, that's a funny last note, though, but yeah.
Do you have any questions?
We have 3 questions from Salary / Gay Anime Girl on Twitter. Any thoughts on the game soundtrack?
I personally love it. I actually had it on my phone when I was at university, and I listened to it a bunch. And I would say it's one of Sakuraba's best works, although it's not like I've listened to all of his soundtracks to say that, but
yeah, I think the battle theme has become a bit of a classic. I've run into cover channels that have done it, a few different versions of it, And I think the battle theme's fantastic. I have to admit, not much of the rest of it stuck with me, but there was also nothing that stuck out to me. It was like, what the fuck is that?
There was no, like, fucking Wingley Lost City bullshit.
Well, something I like about the soundtrack that kind of mirrors what I've been saying about the game being proggish is as you get further into the games, the compositions get more complex, like rhythmically more complex, logically more complex, even dissonant at times. Like if you compare the Mars Tower theme to any of the other earlier dungeon themes, like
it's really tense and just complex rhythms going on.
I mean, it's not like IDM going on, but it's significantly more going on. Like I don't have the good words to say this, but yeah, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. At the end of one of my streams, I got there and I heard the like bass line kick and I was just like, oh shit, this is happening.
Yeah.
It's a good final dungeon theme. The Doom Dragon fight is also got some good music, and it got a cover in Brawl, which is cool.
The special boss fight themes, like when you like the versus Saturos theme too, and the versus Doom Dragon, like a lot of those are like extremely excellent.
Yeah, I think Motoi Sakuraba does his best work when he's working with like a system that has a sound font, and it doesn't sound like really weird to hear like MIDI guitars on something because people give them shit forever about that.
Tales of Phantasia soundtrack's also really good.
Yeah, his Tales soundtracks are good. From Mechtroid, what are some other RPGs that have the rigid flexibility of Golden Sun's Djinn system?
Where else do you see that kind of synergy?
I mean, it's kind of like Final Fantasy Tactics, but it's not.
Yeah, I was going to say Tactics or FF5-ish.
Yeah, I think FF5 is what it's reminding me of.
But that's more like you can build something, and this is more like you can put together like moves that end up also giving you different other moves. So it's kind of, like I said, this is a kind of a weird anomaly of a class system.
It's funny, it's actually like the Persona games in that you need to find and curate the specific list of things that increase your character's power. But then it's not really a rigid flexibility going on. It's just
that's true.
But that's only Persona 1 and 2 because the later ones it's not that complicated.
Yeah, no, I think other RPGs kind of don't have this specific weird composition. Second part of this question, which RPGs do you wish had a system more like Golden Sun's? Anything.
That's an interesting one.
They haven't ripped it off.
It's a system I'd like to see more experiments with.
Personally, I don't really care about seeing the exact same system again, but I like the ambition going on. I like how it has this a certain flow to it and has a certain feel to it, and I just it's good when an RPG has that kind of handle on what they're doing, because most RPGs aren't Dragon Quest and they usually can't get the fundamentals right, or they're trying to be really accessible so they can't afford to quote unquote get the fundamentals right, which means it'd be kind of difficult. Like the game can't be hard, so I like it when a battle system has its own tempo and interpretation to it.
A thought has recently crossed my mind that I would love to see a Golden Sun like ROM hack to just do a total conversion using this battle system to do a different story. Because if I got more chances to mess around with this and also like tweak it so that the Djinn system worked better with how classes and summons work, I would probably love that a lot.
I was going to say I'd play a hard mode hack, but I forgot that the last stage actually has hard mode built into it. And I wouldn't actually play that. I'm not going to play that.
Yeah, no. The funny thing is, it multiplies monster HP by 1.5 and their stats by 1.25, I think. 1.2 for attack and defense. But there's an upper cap of 16,383, I think, for HP. So the hardest boss in the game only gets 383 more HP on it. Dalahan is a fucker.
I'll actually say straight up, Golden Sun wouldn't work as a hard game because you're going to be running back and forth doing the fucking puzzles, and it would actually be the most irritating thing ever. So I'm glad it's actually not very difficult because it can't be and shouldn't be. Although I wish the bosses were like more like Doom Dragon, but it's fine the way it is.
Yeah, I kind of wish the bosses had a better curve, because it feels like you could just stomp all of them, and then the last one is just like, oh yeah, you're underleveled and also don't have all the Djinn. Haha, have fun.
And if you haven't been, it's like it's your first RPG, you haven't really learned how to fight a boss like that either. It's just it's a bad curve.
Also, it's kind of weird that this class system is like, all of your good stats basically come from your collectible like the Djinns give you most of your stats, and they're multipliers basically on your, like they're not multipliers, but they basically amplify your base stats to be like, my character had like 700 HP at the end of Lost Age. Also, I'm always mad when a fucking game has like a level cap of like 99 or 100, and you don't even need to hit level 50 by the end of it. It's just like, come on, space out your levels. I want to hit like level 70 by the end. Level 70 is a good level to hit by the end.
Or actually cap your level at 50 for once.
Yeah.
Just to go back to the question, I think that one game that actually might benefit specifically from when you use an equipped summon, you lose its stat bonuses until you reset it, would be FF8. Because in FF8...
you can just summon forever and ever and ever.
You can summon forever and ever and ever, and it's silly.
Yeah, also, that has, like, the limit break nonsense.
Yeah. Like, FF8 has other problems that this would not solve, but it would add a layer.
Yeah, and it kind of needs that layer. I agree. This is definitely a post, like, PS1 RPG in terms of development on mechanics and turn-based stuff. From Mohop Soul, I know most JRPGs have lineage from the designs and structures of Dragon Quest, but do you feel that Golden Sun is trying to directly derive from it? And if so, how successful or non-successful do y'all think it is in its attempt?
Yes.
You're the one who's played Dragon Quest 3, Leroy. This is probably your beat.
I mean, this is the most Dragon Quest game I've played that's not Dragon Quest.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
even including Breath of Fire.
So there's some, especially Western fans, who'd fight me on this, because the thing that we celebrate in Dragon Quest is not like the aesthetic of it, it's not the mood of it, it's not the comfort of it, not necessarily. I think what a lot of people get out of Dragon Quest is the difficulty of it, and Golden Sun does not have that aspect of it, but it has like everything else. I mean, it's Dragon Quest 3, it is.
And it doesn't have Akira Toriyama design, so I prefer it. Ha ha ha, fight me nerds.
I will fight you.
You fucking do it.
Toriyama designs are fine in 2D, you don't even really, doesn't matter. It's only in 3D, you're like,
I like him in 3D, but
every time I see any of them, I'm just like, well, I'll put up this because there's no other Dragon Quest series. Yeah, Dragon Quest is hell, really. Which is why I like extremely lengthy dungeons and puzzles that drag aside. This was one of the fundamental things that I got into this genre with, and it gave me kind of a solid foundation, even though I never played a Dragon Quest until last year.
Taking the inventory limits from Dragon Quest, though, was pretty... I don't like it. It doesn't do anything much in Golden Sun, except be really annoying.
It also didn't grate much for me. Like, I never hit that limit a lot of the time.
I guess the issue is that items are not very useful, so it doesn't really matter. But, until they're useful at, like, the end of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, they aren't very useful until you lose all your Djinn.
Yeah, like, I kept hold of... until the end of the game, when I got rid of the, like, lower stuff, I held on to nuts, vials, and potions, and waters of life. Everything else, I was just like, nah, I have better options for that. And, the fucking Water of Life, can we talk about how fucked up it is that, like, revives are so brutally unavailable for the first half of Golden Sun the First?
That's Dragon Quest 2.
Yeah,
or that's also how Dragon Quest works.
And Djinn revives don't work 100% of the time, which is also Dragon Quest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fucking hell. I don't think I had as much as a 50% success rate with Djinn revives. I was just... they cost more than using an item!
I did a chain of like 5 revives on Shiva once and she did not come up. I'm just like, alright.
This is why I don't try to rely on that. But also, like, you don't get your first Water of Life until like fucking 8 hours into the Lost Age. Like, it's so long. You can get like plenty in Golden Sun, enough that you can be like, okay, I could sell these and make money so I can buy equipment, or I could hold on to them in case I fucking keel over because something attacked Ivan, and it's always Ivan.
Actually, straight up the worst part of the game, I just thought of this because of talking about items, is having to go to Yellum every time to forge your items, and then having to leave and come back every time.
Yeah.
They could have done that like any other way.
And in literally any other place. I would have been fine with
Forge your weapons anywhere.
Yeah, I really honestly would have been fine if Yellum was just this bumfuck town in the middle of nowhere with like this hint about how to get into Lemuria, and that's it. Like, there doesn't need to be like any other appeal. There doesn't need to be Sunshine. Oh, Sunshine is the name of the blacksmith, by the way. That I'm not being just a downer right now. Well, that's all our questions. Thanks for joining us for this episode of DGC. Next month, we're playing Saga 1 and Saga 2. Both are Game Boy games and thus easily emulatable, but they were released under the title Final Fantasy Legend in the West in an attempt to help them gain traction. And while Akitoshi Kawazu, who handled Final Fantasy II, directed them, they're fairly different from Final Fantasy. There are no reliable ways to play these games legally, unfortunately, so just go for emulation. They're also old enough that I'd recommend having a guide on hand. After that, we'll take a look at Lunar, Silver Star Story. This is a PlayStation port of a Sega Saturn remake of a Sega CD JRPG, the first game in the Lunar series, which consists of 4 distinct games with 3 remakes and 1 imagining of the first game, and 1 remake each for the second and third game. This is not available anywhere legally, so emulation is, once again, the best option. There's also a PSP port that you can play legally, but I don't know that it's similar enough to carry the same experience. It is, however, $15 on the PlayStation Store in North America. You can find our work on our website, jrpgsaredead.foi, or our Twitter at jrpgsaredead, or individually at Invisible for me, at Eat the Pen for Becky, and at What's Not Why Not for Leroy. You can also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/deadgenre. Look forward to Leroy's new DGC affiliated podcast launching later this month, as well as mine with Samuel Howitt, talking about The Witcher. Leroy is talking about indie games. We are not all talking about The Witcher. That would be awful.
2 separate Witcher podcasts.
Yes.
Why not?
This is how we will get popular. Join us next time for episode 27 of Dead Genre Chronicles.